Huh? 1, 2, 3, 4. Huh? 1.
Having a great exercise regimen and a great diet, I think those things are absolutely foundational.
This week on the Union of Muscle podcast, Season 2, Episode 19, I'll be speaking with Jesse Lawler, where we're going to give you metrics by which you can decide for yourself which supplements are going to be most advantageous for what you want.
I'm Jesse Lawler. You're listening to the Union of Muscles podcast. Lift strong and prosper.
Ładnie, silno pracować. Umieć budować i prosperować.
Dźwigaj dużo i odnoś sukces.
The views presented here may or may not be those of the host, guest, Union of Muscle, Black Hat Management, or its affiliates. Any information in this podcast should first be reviewed by the corresponding professional, whether that's medical, financial, or legal, before applying it to your life. Keep listening until the end of this episode to learn how you can get a discount off Axon Labs products, which are mentioned here today. Do you work in health and fitness or want to? Feel free to contact me, Coach Paul, at unionofmuscle.com for more information. Would you like to lose 10, 20, 50, or 60 pounds and still eat those carbohydrates? Coach Balamain, the carb-loading king, can get you trim, fit, and full of muscle while still eating those carbohydrates. So go to www.unionofmuscle.com and click on the Fitness Coaches tab and find Coach Barlamain. And remember to lift strong and prosper. Go to www.unionofmuscle.com and click on Find a Fitness Coach to find a coach that fits your needs the best. You're listening to the Union of Muscle podcast, where muscle meets information and inspiration. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Union of Muscles podcast. I'm here with a very special guest, Jesse Lawler. He has his very own podcast, and I'm hoping that you guys might find some of the things he's learning interesting as well. Jesse, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey there, my name is Jesse Lawler. I've got a podcast that I do on smart drugs and what are called nootropics, called Smart Drug Smarts. Basically, for the past almost 3 years, I've been interviewing experts in various fields around neuroscience and brain optimization about everything that I can do to make myself as smart as possible and what other people who want to listen in on the podcast can kind of do to accomplish the same goals. We've been talking with everybody from experts on things like the racetam family of chemicals to transcranial direct current stimulation to meditation and lucid dreaming, all kinds of different stuff. My background is as a software developer. That's actually sort of my real job. And this has been sort of a labor of love that's been getting more and more and more serious over the past couple of years. We're just in the process now of actually unveiling our first nootropic supplement compounds. But that's something that literally has just happened this week. Yeah, it's pretty exciting time.
Now, Jesse, why care? What's so important to you about increasing your intelligence, I guess? Is that what you're going for, and why are you going for it?
I've said before that I'm smart enough to realize that I'd like to be even smarter. I've always kind of been into brain, psychology, science, metacognition, thinking about thinking. Once I discovered that there was such a thing as smart drugs, that there are drugs that actually help you think more clearly or have sustained focus for a longer period of time, that was really interesting. Like everybody else, I was aware of recreational drugs in our culture, things like alcohol and stuff like that people are typically familiar with from a very young age. How those sort of diminish our cognition to one degree or another. And it was just fascinating to me, the idea that there might be something that could take you in the opposite direction. Like, what would the opposite of a hangover feel like? It just piqued my curiosity. So I started to look into what was available. I've dabbled in, at this point more than dabbled, but I've tried out a variety of these compounds. And then there's some of them that I've looked into it and decided that the safety profiles didn't seem well established enough for me, or the safety profiles clearly were not safe enough. And so some things I've steered clear from, but basically, the podcast has sort of been following my own exploration into this world, seeing sort of what dials and levers I feel like I can twist on my own cognition.
So what do you mean by smarter, then? What entails being smarter? Is that just being able to test better, or?
It's a great question, actually. I'm thinking about having an episode sort of around deconstructing that word smart sometime soon, because we all have sort of the grade school definition of in our head of what smart is. It's like, okay, that kid got better than me on a math test, therefore he's smarter. Really, the types of intelligence can break down into a lot of different things. Everything from, speed of processing, how quickly can I do these math problems, to emotional intelligence, how well am I reading people in the room and understanding what their real motivations are? Is that a real smile or a fake smile? That kind of thing. How many numbers can I hold in my head at one time? Can I juxtapose different ideas from unrelated areas and come up with new and creative ways of putting these ideas together? Smartness is no one thing, either within the actual results in the world, nor within the brain. There's a lot of different areas of the brain that have effects on what we might overall consider, how smart is this person, or in what areas is this person smart. One thing that's important to recognize is that our brain, as evolution has given it to us, is a very good multi-purpose sort of cross-training brain for the environments that we typically would have found ourselves in an ancestral environment. So to think that we're going to be able to add a chemical and make our brain universally across the board better is probably a little bit fanciful. But I think what we definitely are finding that we can do is we can amplify the brain's ability to perform a certain type of task or get into a certain type of mood, and recognize that there might be some trade-offs, but just being able to apply those directionality moves when we want to, it is, I think, a really powerful thing, and something that science is now giving us the ability to do.
So we had Rick Rosner on a few weeks back, and has supposedly the second highest IQ in the world. So we talked a little bit about his vitamin and drug regimen that he uses. He also just spent a lot of time getting real good at the test, just practicing these IQ tests and learning about what they actually do. He's led a very interesting life, and not all the choices he's maybe made in life seemed all that intelligent as he was going along, even though he was really good at these IQ tests.
Right.
There was a kind of maybe a social and maybe some other aspects of his life that weren't so intelligent. People are now getting a bit even more interested in that gut feeling, too. I'm hearing a lot of people, wanting to, either they're calling it the universe or whatever, but something that's prompting them to have a certain amount of intuition and things like that, this gut feeling, being moved by the heart, and this kind of emotional intelligence. Is that something, too, that you're looking into?
I'm not 100% sure that I follow the question, but I mean, I can certainly see where somebody that is a hyper, book smart numbers, studying for IQ tests guy, the kind of skills that you're building when you're studying for those tests are not necessarily the kind of skills that are going to be conducive to a social environment. Practice makes perfect sort of in all things. And if you're really optimizing your test-taking abilities, chances are that you're sacrificing a lot of time that might optimize your social performance, which isn't to say a person can't be good at both. But again, there's a time trade-off regardless of how smart you are. You kind of need to get in your reps with being friendly with your fellow humans.
So how do you know that it's the drugs and the supplements you're taking and not that you're just practicing the things that are testing whether or not you're getting, faster, smarter, what have you?
I think there's definitely a variety of both. Anything that you're going to be spending time on and testing yourself on, practicing, you're going to be getting better based on practice. I mean, there's no way around that. There's also, placebo is a very real and powerful positive thing. I did a placebo episode, and I found this fascinating, is that even when a drug does have real effects, you will also get placebo effects from it. For the example that was given, the doctor that I was interviewing, morphine and pain relief. If you have something causing you a lot of pain and you're given morphine for 4 or 5 days in a row and your body realizes wow, I get this morphine shot and my pain dramatically is reduced. Day 5, day 6, they give you a shot of pure placebo. You're going to feel your pain dramatically reduce almost to the 100% pain reduction level that you got from the morphine just because you expected it so much. And that doesn't mean that the morphine wasn't working. It certainly was. It's just that the expectation that goes along with the application of that compound at that point, when you get the morphine, you're going to even get a little bit more of a bump that comes from your own psychology of expectation at that point. To get back to your earlier question of how do you know these things are working, you really have to go to the double-blind, placebo-controlled studies where they're doing these at research universities and things like that all the time, and sometimes with the ones that go through the FDA trials and stuff, private industry, to really see what actual measurable effects are these chemicals having on groups of people's cognition. Is it something that is improving their their memory, their verbal facility and acuity, their long-term potentiation within the brain. They have different ways of sort of teasing these things apart. And, some chemicals will do one but not the other. It might have better verbal dexterity, but won't necessarily help your memory, or vice versa. There are definitely plenty of these that pass the threshold for having repeatable, measurable effects.
Yeah, we get a lot of similar questions that come up when it comes to physical supplements that are supposed to help you work out better and lose the weight and everything. And I find that even when you do the research, you have to almost research the research sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
Because I remember I was listening to one guy on YouTube, and I won't say the name who it was, but he sells supplements. That's his main income, and he was telling his audience how this one supplement was proven in studies to work. So I researched the studies, and the study was very precursor. It was done on maybe like 5 to 15 people, and that's really not enough to make a real good scientific conclusion according to what I learned about statistics. Usually you need about 100 or more, and then it needs to be something that's done repetitively enough and in a diverse enough group that you can start making conclusions. But a study of 15 people who happen to have X result, usually, unless you're going to repeat that, and that's good news to begin.
There's like a major correlation, I think, between the size of the effect and the size of the population being studied to see if it's something you should pay attention to. If you do a study of only 5 to 15 people and you find a kind of small effect, then that's probably just, noise in the system. For a study of 5 to 15 people to be something that you would consider scientifically significant, it would need to be a major, major effect. Now, if you give 5 people a drug and they all drop dead, you should probably pay attention to that, even though it's only 5 people, because it's a really significant effect. But if you give 5 people a drug and you find that those 5 people are 1% smarter or 1% sleepier or something, could just be, noise in the system. So that correlation between how many people were involved, how long was the period of the study, and what was the actual effect size all need to be taken into consideration. And I think what you said is really true, is people have the ability, much like if you wanted to talk about history, you can there's enough history out there, you can cherry pick any particular event, and if you only pick one event, you can prove almost any point you want to. If you sort of look at the broad scope of history and all the different things that happen, you can start to make some general conclusions. And I think the same thing certainly holds true with scientific studies, is you want to not necessarily bet the farm on any one particular study, on any one particular chemical or intervention even, but instead look at some of the commonalities you see between related studies that do seem like they can have apples to apples comparisons made, see where the science seems to be lining up. If a study is significant and interesting, it tends to be followed up with other studies where researchers will try to either corroborate it or disprove it. That really is the scientific method. You should be trying to disprove everything, not trying to prove everything.
I know you're not a doctor, so nobody can go out there and medically go off anything you say here, but in your research and maybe things you've heard out there, have you found that exercise or maybe weightlifting can improve your mental cognition or your smartness?
Absolutely. That seems to be almost unequivocally held up by study after study. There's a book called Spark that I think is probably 4 or 5 years old at this point, but that would definitely be worth checking out. It is a book that's sort of a summary of maybe the past 10 to 15 years of research into the cognitive effects of exercise, and it stacks up very, very positively. Basically, there's nothing bad to say about exercise except, you can blow out your knees or something if you have bad form. But you have to look pretty long and hard to find a scientist or a physiologist that will tell you, don't exercise. It's not worth it. It's overhyped. Exercise is good. Everybody knows that. I'm really into smart drugs and nootropics and brain enhancement, but that is not to say that in any way I discount having a great exercise regimen and a great diet. I think those things are absolutely foundational.
Do you want to lift strong? Go to www unionofmuscle.com and click on Fitness Coach tab. There, you will find fitness coaches who are ready to help you lift strong. What's great is that once you have your own fitness coach, either as a consultant or one-on-one, you can also earn more fit coins for completing the goals the coaches set for you. Live strong and prosper. Join the union. Do you work in health and fitness or want to? Feel free to contact me, Coach Paul, at unionofmuscle.com for more information. Don't forget to use your promo code MUSCLE1 at www.earthskinbodycare.com, www.rubberarmmusclerub.com, and now www.ewcmma.net. I want to thank all you beautiful fitness freaks, geeks, and athletes for going to www.unionofmuscle.com and clicking on the Patrons tab. There, you are able to sign up as a patron. As a patron, you get access to commercial-free episodes of the Union of Muscle podcast. Additionally, you get additional ways to earn fit coins. You're assigned a Union of Muscles coach who's going to help you stay accountable to your own personal fitness goals. If you haven't signed up as a patron to the podcast and to the Union of Muscle, go ahead and do so now. Just head over to www.unionofmuscle.com and click on the Patrons tab. And remember to lift strong and prosper. You're listening to the Union of Muscle podcast, where muscle meets information and inspiration.
Having a great exercise regimen and a great diet, I think those things are absolutely foundational. And one of the things that I say on my show time and time and time again, because I know that some of the listeners to my show are interested in finding a pill to solve all their problems, is that the marginal benefits that you can get from a smart drug, they might crank you for 20%, 30% on a given day, and if you balance things out right, maybe you could be 10 to 15% smarter perpetually. But on the other hand, if you're undercutting your performance by having a toxin-filled diet or just having, crappy lifestyle habits that include, being sedentary and not exercising, then you're undercutting what should be your basic physiological baseline by so much more. I think it really makes sense to try to get the foundational stuff right before layering in some of these, what I would consider bonuses like smart drugs.
You too have a workout regimen or an exercise regimen that you keep to?
I vary it up. It really kind of depends on the time of year and what I'm into, and I try not to do one thing so long that my muscles all get used to it, and then you try something else and all of a sudden you find, I haven't used that muscle in 6 months. I'm a cyclist, I'm a runner, I do lifting on occasion. I've been getting more into lifting since reading that book, Spark, actually, because one of the things that I really took away from that was that for cognitive purposes, it seems like the super high intensity exercise has more benefits than the cardio.
I'm hearing more and more about the benefits of weight training. Not that you can't get benefits from cardio, but that they kind of seem to stack faster with weight training, which is really funny because it goes against our whole ideology that there's a lot of dumb jocks out there with big muscles, but nothing upstairs.
Yeah, we've got that popular sort of archetype in the popular imagination of just like the meat-headed jock that talks like this and has the neck thicker than his brain. But yeah, the science doesn't bear that out. And it kind of makes sense. We have this weird leftover, I guess, like Judeo-Christian thing of really thinking of the mind and body as two very separate things. But that's just not right. It's like the mind and the body. It's like we're all one package, man. As we strengthen our physiological processes through exercise, it gets down simply to things like more capillaries of blood that are reaching the brain. More oxygen to the brain helps you think better, and who'd have thunk it?
And I would also think that increasing your intelligence, your cognitive abilities, would also translate into helping you work out better. I notice that when I'm actually able to concentrate better on what I'm doing in a lift, when I'm able to wash out the noise and be able to focus, I can then see how what I'm doing in this exercise is affecting the muscles that are being moved, and I can get it down to how much tension I want to put on into my pinky finger holding the weight as to how it's affecting the muscle I'm trying to work out. and you can focus on your breathing. So there's a lot of things that can go on to maximize the benefit of an exercise. And if you don't have a clear mind, if you don't have the ability to focus, you're not going to get good results out of the exercise. You're going to plateau quite frequently because you're not able to keep up the level of intensity because you're not focusing on the so many different things that can go into maximizing your workout.
I was mentioning some of the different types of intelligence earlier. One of them that I didn't mention but absolutely deserves mentioning is like kinesthetic awareness of kind of that intelligence that like ballet dancers have, or that, like you said, high-level weightlifters could have, of really knowing what all the elements of your body are doing at each time and coordinating those things. It's like, the motor cortex is a big, very important, very evolutionarily old chunk of our brain, and everything what we can do to help the motor cortex is going to have, physical payoffs in the gym.
Yeah, and then I would think that would also translate into helping you live a longer, healthier life, because sometimes it's not the disease that does somebody in, but it's a fall down the stairs.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that too.
So having that intelligence of knowing what your body's doing, as you put it, would help you in those moments. Have you found a certain mix of nootropics that seem to work for you, or where are you at on all this?
It's interesting. It's been a very evolutionary process, even before I started the podcast, but certainly sort of accelerated in the past couple of years since I've been talking with people about this stuff on a weekly basis. There are some things that are in my absolutely, take them every day. The omega-3 fatty acids, fish oils, the, vitamin D3, some of these things, if people don't supplement with them and they're on anything like a standard American diet, they're almost certainly going to be shy in a couple of resources. And then there are other things that I've taken kind of on a rotating basis that I've found that I like and I get good results from, but that I don't want to build up any sort of tolerance to. And then I guess sort of the most recent evolution in that process is, as we've been developing these two nootropic stacks that were, just kind of released to the market now, kind of getting those into the mix and trying to, or I was really overtly hoping to create something that would be, combining several of the jars on my medicine cabinet and having something so I could take 1 or 2 pills a day that combine several of these things rather than needing to, buy them each individually at GNC or whatever. So one of the two products is a mitochondrial blend sort of aimed at general mitochondrial enhancement, also has some cognitive benefits. And that's probably kind of my daily multivitamin, I guess, at this point, although I still am taking things like the fish oil and the D3 separately.
Right, so our mitochondria, for those who don't remember, are the powerhouse of the cell. What gives our cells energy, and which is really interesting because it's not even part of the human genome, mitochondria. You get that, I believe, from your mother, and it kind of hitchhikes into your cells. Mitochondria are very interesting, especially when it comes to weight training and weightlifting, because we need that energy. We need our cells to be able to grow and to reproduce and to have that energy. So I would think that mitochondrial health could help somebody perform better, not just cognitively, but physically as well.
Oh, yeah. Mitochondria are in every cell of your body. I think they're in every cell, even of plants. There's like the 5 kingdoms of life, and I think that only bacteria don't have mitochondria. If I remember my biology correctly, they think that mitochondria were originally like a free-living organism, like, way back when, like, billions of years in history, and they eventually started living symbiotically inside what would become eukaryotic cells, and that symbiosis became so close that now, even though mitochondria, as you mentioned, have their own DNA, they don't exist outside of cells, and they do exist inside of all eukaryotic cells now. But it's essentially what their role is, and I'm going to be radically oversimplifying this, and biochemists will probably come and slap me around a little bit, but there's something called adenosine triphosphate, which you'll generally hear referred to as ATP. And ATP is kind of like gasoline for the cell. It's the lowest common denominator energy source. When you're talking with weightlifters, you're probably talking about, what's your blood sugar like, glucose, or if somebody's on a ketogenic diet, what sort of ketone bodies they have. In both cases, those are sort of floating within the bloodstream, sort of precursors to what actually gets used as energy at an intracellular level. Once the glucose makes it across the cell membrane, it's actually going to get broken down into ATP. So the intracellular processes, whether it's coming from ketone bodies or coming from glucose, is ultimately going to be ATP. That's sort of the lowest common denominator of cellular energy. and mitochondria are the manufacturing plants for those things.
What's in this supplement that's going to help people's mitochondria?
Okay, well, let's see. Here's where I get into the science-sounding words. The main one is something called sulbuthiamine. Sulbuthiamine is actually a synthetic version of vitamin B1, which crosses the blood-brain barrier a little bit better than vitamin B1. It was invented by the Japanese during, I think, World War II, when they had people that were at sea for a long time and were getting, if I'm correct about this, it's something called beriberi, which is if you don't get enough fresh foods, then it's kind of like how if you don't go have vitamin C for a long time, you'll get scurvy. If you don't have vitamin B1 for a long time, you'll get beriberi. And so Japanese chemists invented sulbuthiamine, which crosses the blood-brain barrier. It's a synthetic B1 and has both nootropic properties, and it's also used within the mitochondria. So let's see. Let me actually go down the list. Vitamin C, vitamin B5, sulbuthiamine, which is this synthetic B1. It's kind of like an amplified version of B1. There's arlipoic acid, which you're probably familiar with. Idebenone. Idebenone is a synthetic and sort of amplified version of coenzyme Q10. All 5 of those that I just named help the processes along within the mitochondria to the end result of being able to produce more ATP and faster. Some of these are sort of enzymatic helpers that help various processes within the mitochondria happen. Some are actually chemical precursors. Just make sure that some of the stockpiles of chemicals that the mitochondria need never run short. And then the last ingredient in this product is called mitogen, is the name of it, or short for mitochondrial generation. Is something called BioPQ. And what that does, as opposed to helping the mitochondrial processes, is it actually encourages the body to produce more mitochondria in number. Mitochondria, as we mentioned, they live within cells, but it's not like there's one mitochondria per cell, the way that there would be like one nucleus per cell. One cell can have dozens, hundreds, I think even thousands in some cases of mitochondria. And cells that you have greater energy requirements have more mitochondria. This particular supplement, we made it around 2 things. We made it around the short-term benefit of making sure that your mitochondria that you have right now have an ample fuel supply and are able to do their job quickly. And then also helping you build more mitochondria so you have sort of a larger long-term capacity.
All right, so we got some things that are going to help out the mitochondria. Are you going to feel it? Is that something you feel that, hey, my mitochondria are doing great. I can feel it if people take it, or how do you know it works?
That's a great question. So I wasn't really sure the first time I took, there's one thing I knew was going to happen on sulbuthiamine. I'll come back to that in a moment. But yeah, I wasn't sure the extent that I was really going to feel this blend. I do. It's not like a stay awake sort of thing like caffeine or modafinil or one of these sleep denial drugs. But I definitely feel like a real vigorousness when I take mitogen. I've got good physical energy. I've used it for workouts. I've used it for sitting around and typing on the computer. It just kind of keeps me very, very perked up for a long time. People have been very pleasantly surprised, I think, by the actual subjective effects of it. I didn't necessarily take it the first time thinking this was something I was going to feel. I like the science behind all the product, or behind all the components of it. It's definitely something that does have like a subjective. I can tell that I took something. I do feel some extra vim and vigor.
Yeah, because I've noticed that some people have a hard time believing that something works if they don't feel an effect. Even though it might be working on a level that you're not going to feel an effect, it's hard to make that leap of faith sometimes that, the science is sound, the science says this, but if you don't feel like it's working for you, sometimes people are going to have a hard time keeping on with it.
I completely agree with that. I mean, there are definitely things in my medicine cabinet. The omega-3 fatty acids are one that would be an example. It's like, I feel that. It's like on a day that I didn't eat fish oil, it's like I wouldn't have known, like, I feel like I didn't have any fish oil today. But on the other hand, I think the science is so compelling and so persuasive that, of course, it's just part of my daily stack and it's something that I always take. On the other hand, one decision that we made really early in the process when we were designing these couple of stacks that we just released was, let's not put any caffeine in this. I always kind of feel like that's cheating when I see a compound mix that includes caffeine, because then it's like, if you do feel something, unless you're like the supplement whisperer, being able to tease apart whether what you're feeling is the caffeine versus something else is going to be really, really difficult.
Well, I know there's a few times I'll take a supplement that has also a niacin in there, and some foods have a good quantity of niacin in there, or is that B3, which will also give you the niacin flush or the niacin effect if you take a large enough quantity that you're not used to, which has benefits to it, but it's not necessarily to say that that's giving you anything else that supplement's meant to do. So it's hard to tease that apart for some people. I think if you know what that niacin flush feels like, you'll be able to tell the difference between that and a caffeine rush. Yeah, that's something that is noticeable, and I think anyone could probably throw that into a supplement, and now people are going to feel like it's working because of the niacin effect, or, same with the caffeine effect.
So something I didn't mention earlier, I said I'd come back to, but one thing that you'll definitely tell is working with mitogen, or at least you can sense it.
I want to thank all you beautiful fitness freaks, geeks, and athletes for going to www.unionofmuscle.com and clicking on the Patrons tab. There, you are able to sign up as a patron. As a patron, you get access to commercial-free episodes of the Union of Muscle podcast. Additionally, you get additional ways to earn fit coins. You're assigned a Union of Muscles coach who's going to help you stay accountable to your own personal fitness goals. If you haven't signed up as a patron to the podcast and to the Union of Muscle, go ahead and do so now. Just head over to www.unionofmuscle.com and click on the Patrons tab. And remember to lift strong and prosper. Would you like to lose 10, 20, 50, or 60 pounds and still eat those carbohydrates? Coach Bob LeMaine, the carb loading king, can get you trim, fit, and full of muscle while still eating those carbohydrates. So go to www.unionofmuscle.com and click on the Fitness Coaches tab and find Coach Bob LeMaine. And remember to lift strong and prosper. Do you work in health and fitness or want to? Feel free to contact me, Coach Paul, at unionofmuscle.com for more information. You're listening to the Union of Muscle podcast, where muscle meets information and inspiration.
One thing that you'll definitely tell is working with mitogen, or at least you can sense it. It does make your pee smell a little bit funny. And you might know this, B vitamins do this for some people. I'm one of those people. If you eat a lot of asparagus, then you eat some asparagus and your pee smells funny afterwards. Definitely have noticed that with this supplement mix, and that's synthetic B1 and the L-buthiamine. So if you like your pee to smell a very certain way, then this might not be the compound for you.
I don't think many people who are as intense in bodybuilding as some of us are, who listen to this podcast, are too worried about that. We have a lot of competitors who come on, and I'm sure they're putting their body through all kinds of crazy things to get them where they need to be to get up on stage. So I don't think you have to worry too much, but it's always good to know these things. It's always good to know these things going into something, because then somebody isn't surprised. They're not like, oh, well, my pee's starting to smell funny. I wonder if that means there's something wrong.
Yeah, no, it was just kind of a surprise. I knew to expect it, but it was like definitely something that was there. I figure I should mention it. I didn't want somebody to think that something was broken because they smelled something weird. The other thing I feel like we should mention, and I'm sure this is something you've talked about on other shows with supplements, is that some of these things really do vary on a person-to-person basis. And I was a little bit surprised, actually, because I'm only one person, and until I started doing a podcast about this stuff, I wasn't really comparing notes terribly often with other people's results on certain things. Compounds that I'll take and feel one thing, somebody else will take, feel something else, and that, even with like something as simple as caffeine, which 90% of all adult humans in the world drink on a daily basis, I've talked with people that say that caffeine makes them sleepy. And, for most of us, that's like, wait, what are you talking about? That's exactly crazy. Some of these things, it just really does have some personal difference. And I kind of feel like it's worth dipping if the safety profile on a chemical is appropriate, it's worth dipping your toes in a couple of these things and just seeing what the effects are for you, because it will vary one person to the next.
Yeah, no, I'm someone who I'll get pretty immune to caffeine pretty quick, and then at some point, it doesn't matter how much to take. If I'm tired, I'm tired. It just doesn't matter anymore. And I have family members who are like that, who take coffee right before they go to bed to help tuck them in.
It's funny, I was speaking with a doctor on caffeine. Her name was Dr. Lawler Giuliano, and she was saying how they have such a hard time actually doing studies on caffeine because they can't find naive audiences. They can't find people that haven't been exposing themselves to caffeine perpetually on a day-to-day basis, unless they're the 10% of people who have like an extreme adverse reaction to caffeine, and that's why they're not taking it. So it's just so, cooked into our culture. It's a difficult one to really accurately study.
Speaking of variation in individuals, and we've had Brian Dunning on from Skeptoid, and if you take his view on most supplements, is that they don't do anything, and that if you just eat a healthy diet, that's going to bring you to a healthy diet. But I push back a little bit on that. Sorry, Brian, I don't know if you're listening to this one or not, but I push back a little bit when it comes to fitness and maybe nootropics, is that we're not trying to be healthy, so to speak. We're not trying to stay at the norm. We're trying to find a way to push a little bit above the norm. So anytime you're doing a study, there is going to be some type of curve, whether that, normally a bell curve, sometimes it might be skewed one way or another, and sometimes you might be the person that's on those outliers. So those outliers are there. They're part of the study. Why it may not be the majority of the people who react that way, you still have these statistically proven people who are on the outskirts. And it could be that they're different. It could be, you don't know exactly what is there, but there are those outliers which seem to be there.
I think there's a couple of really interesting points you brought up there. One is that health and performance are not necessarily always aligned with one another. One example that I like to give is, we get the word marathon because, of course, it was the original thing was this guy getting chased and running to the town of Marathon. And he ran to Marathon, but he died when he got there. It's like he just did this amazing physical accomplishment, but he was so exhausted after this epic performance that his health, that is being alive, was highly adversely affected. The guy died. And sometimes there are these trade-offs between, long-term health and short-term performance. And I'm not making a moral judgment one way or another on those things. But if, for example, if things like steroids didn't work, they wouldn't have a reason to make them illegal in the Olympics. It's like we do know that there are ways of modulating the body's performance and the brain's performance. It's like that doesn't really seem even open to discussion. The question is, what are the ways that we can do this stuff as safely as possible, provably and safely as possible? And it might be for some people that they're willing to have some health consequences in order to get some performance. It's like, I feel like that's a choice that adults should be able to make as long as they're given the information. But ideally, we can find things that are healthful for us, or at least health neutral, but that are performance beneficial.
I think that's what you were talking about, is looking at those risk factors and seeing whether or not they're the risk of trying something out, or seeing if it works for you or how it works for you. It's funny when you talk about steroids. They were just doing. I was just listening to Science Friday. Either it was this week or a week or two back, and they're looking at steroids, these anabolic steroids, and trying to isolate the part which reduces sperm count, or in order to find a male contraceptive.
That's great. Talk about turning a lemon into a lemonade.
Yeah. So they're looking at that. I think they said they isolated the compound, and now they're doing tests to see if they can't produce, the male form of birth control.
There are like two lines of thought there that I wanted to go down, and I went down one of them. And about the psychology of some doctors and people saying, well, just have a basic, healthy diet, healthy lifestyle, and leave it at that. I've talked with a lot of medical doctors who are so dispirited with the standard state of health in your average American these days that, honestly, they're banging their heads against the wall sometimes just to get people to take rudimentary care of themselves, just to not start the day with a bowl of Cheetos. It's like it exhausts them to get people to do the bare minimum of physical maintenance. And the last thing that they're really interested in is trying to figure out how to optimize the less than 1% of the population that's like me, and that's people like your audience that are really looking to, well, I'm already healthy. Now I want to be super effing healthy. We're the elite minority. And that's not what doctors are used to dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And to a certain extent, I think we kind of annoy them sometimes, because if you're the general family practitioner, you're trying to help the person who needs to lose 70 pounds, not the person who wants to be able to run their marathon a little bit faster.
We do try to help out everybody here who's interested in losing weight or getting in shape, but it's always in my mind, the idea is you want to be able to continually improve. So no matter where you're starting, if you're starting at 70 pounds overweight, or if you're starting at 5% body fat, you always want to have that ability to improve, because that's part of the excitement of staying physically fit, of getting involved in fitness, is being able to see that improvement. And I think that goes to another point that we try to make in the podcast, is that it might be the theme of this season. It seems like every season we have a theme. That what works for somebody who's been working out for years is not the same thing that's going to work out for somebody who's just starting out. So Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson might eat a huge stack of pancakes on his cheat day, but for normal people who are just starting out, having that type of epic cheat day is not recommended. And I think it goes through some of their workout routines and things like that. There are things they're doing now, the most elite people, that the beginners shouldn't be doing. Are nootropics kind of that way? Do you kind of start at a beginning area of things to look at and see before you get into something more serious?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be sensible for anybody to kind of, dip their toes in slowly and understand kind of what the effects that they're going for are and the safety profiles of the things that they're talking about are. So, like, we've done episodes on things like Adderall and Ritalin, which are supposed to really be quite amazing as far as the ability of mental focus that they allow a person to give. Reading a book in an afternoon and having full comprehension, full memory of it, things like that. It's like, you hear some amazing claims, and yet I've never tried either of these myself, despite admittedly being quite curious, because the safety profile on these doesn't stack with what I want to put into my body. And I'm not willing to accept the health decrement in exchange for the short-term performance increment. Then there are other things, like modafinil is an example of this, where there's probably a little bit of a health decrement in that it chews on your liver a little bit to the extent that maybe something like an aspirin would. But on the other hand, I feel cognitive benefits, and I feel like I'm willing to have an aspirin's worth of chewing on my liver in exchange for the cognitive benefits that I can reliably get from it. And on balance, I think that works out for me. And so, yeah, it really is sort of a person by person and chemical by chemical judgment, I guess. But that's sort of what I've been trying to do is get the information out there on the table where people can, get themselves educated and be able to make these judgments.
So if people want to get that information from you, what are the best sources?
I would love it if anybody wanted, visit my website or subscribe to my podcast. That is smartdrugsmarts.com. Or if you Google my name, it's Jesse, Jesse. Last name is Lawler, Lawler. You're going to find yourself there pretty quickly. But there's a lot of places online where you can find information relating to nootropics. Reddit.com has a pretty active nootropics thread and community. There's a website called longecity.org, like the word longevity, except city instead of vidi. And they've got a lot of people that are interested in things like extreme life extension, but there's also a big crossover with the nootropics community. Yeah, I'd say those are probably three of the main places I would recommend checking out would be Reddit, Longecity, and then the podcast that I've got.
And if they want to look into these supplements or these nootropics that you've developed, same place, your website?
Yeah, actually, this goes to show just how new to this whole e-commerce thing I am. We just launched last week, and here I am completely forgetting to mention my own website, so that was stupid. But yeah, we just launched. We're keeping Smart Drug Smarts kind of a media thing, something that it's the podcast, but it's not.
Right, information.
Yeah. And so then for the sales of these products, we set up a site called Axon Labs. And the website there is axonlabs.io. And there will be links to Axon Labs from the Smart Drug Smarts website, but we're not doing the sales directly on the Smart Drug Smarts website. So yeah, thank you for reminding me about my own darn store.
That's all right. And we'll put those in the show notes so you don't have to stop driving. You don't have to stop working out. You can keep on pushing through those sets with all the intensity that you want, knowing that that'll be in the show notes to look at.
Definitely.
I want to thank you for taking time to come on the podcast, Jesse. Any last words before we go?
No, but thank you so much for having me on, man. It was really a pleasure. And like I said, I think we're really in alignment on the idea that the foundational stuff of nutrition and exercise is absolutely key. And of course, those things are going to benefit your cognition just like smart drugs and supplements can. It all goes together.
Definitely. Once again, I want to thank you for coming on, and for all you beautiful fitness freaks, geeks, and athletes out there, remember to lift strong and prosper. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Do you want to lift strong? Go to www.unionofmuscle.com and click on Fitness Coach tab. There, you will find fitness coaches who are ready to help you lift strong. What's great is that once you have your own fitness coach, either as a consultant or one-on-one, you can also earn more fit coins for completing the goals the coaches set for you. Live strong and prosper. Join the union. Do you work in health and fitness or want to? Feel free to contact me, Coach Paul, at unionofmuscle.com for more information. Don't forget to use your promo code MUSCLE1 at www.earthskinbodycare.com, www.rubberarmmusclerub.com, and now www.ewcmma.net. I want to thank all you beautiful fitness freaks, geeks, and athletes for going to www.unionofmuscle.com and clicking on the Patrons tab. There, you are able to sign up as a patron. As a patron, you get access to commercial-free episodes of the Union of Muscle podcast. Additionally, you get additional ways to earn fit coins. You're assigned a Union of Muscles coach who's going to help you stay accountable to your own personal fitness goals. If you haven't signed up as a patron to the podcast and to the Union of Muscle, go ahead and do so now. Just head over to www.unionofmuscle.com and click on the Patrons tab. And remember to lift strong and prosper. Go to www.unionofmuscle.com and click on Find a Fitness Coach to find a coach that fits your needs the best. Would you like to lose 10, 20, 50, or 60 pounds and still eat those carbohydrates? Coach Bob LeMaine, the carb loading king, can get you trim, fit, and full of muscle while still eating those carbohydrates. So go to www.unionofmuscle.com and click on the Fitness Coaches tab and find Coach Bob LeMaine. And remember to lift strong and prosper. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this podcast episode. You can now use your Union of Muscle discount code MUSCLE1 at Axon Labs. Just go to axonlabs.io and enter in our coupon code on checkout, MUSCLE1 for 10% off. It's just another way me and Axon Labs thank you for tuning into this episode and every week of the Union of Muscle podcast. Remember, all you beautiful fitness freaks, geeks, and athletes, to lift strong and prosper. You've been listening to the Union of Muscle podcast. All rights are reserved by the content's creators.